Hello world of YouTube, and welcome to an oddly timely episode of
Expectations. Reality.
the show where I talk about what I expected to get out of a game before talking about the reality of what I faced when I played it. And this episode is special now for a few reasons. One, because as you can tell by the title and the runtime, this is going to be a longer episode of the show in the newer format. I'm going to sort of retool it a bit for this special occasion that I may revisit in the future, but has been a video I've been sort of working on for the last couple of months in the background. You guys saw me stream these games last year, and this is a sort of bucket list trilogy, and I was going to make like a fun video out of it. However, now it's weirdly timely as hell because Konami is pulling themselves back into the software market and is publishing a remake of one of the games in this trilogy. The trilogy in question, of course, being the Metal Gear Solid trilogy. I'm talking Metal Gear Solid 1 for the PS1, published in 1998, Metal Gear Solid 2, Sons of Liberty for the PS2, published in 2001, and Metal Gear Solid 3, Snake Eater, the one getting the remake, published in 2004. This series as a whole, even past these three games, like I said up at the front, has been a sort of enigmatic thing for me. I have had friends like Dusty who are super into this series. This game's series, especially these three games, were very heavily praised around the times that I was indulging in video game, style media in the form of like G4. That led to me learning some of the Easter eggs that crop up throughout at least these two games, but this game itself has had sort of an evolved opinion that I've also watched unfold throughout pockets of the community. And again, similarly to Shadow of the Colossus, I've still kept myself pretty blind to the experiences of them all, which may again sound shocking given, again, I've had friends that I've made a lot of stuff with that are huge fans of these games. I will say up front, not knowing that sort of stuff definitely enriched my experience with these games, because these games have a lot of sort of mythos surrounding them that transcend a lot of other stealth games that have been released in the history of gaming. The director and sort of creative head of these games, Hideo Kojima, definitely has a unique way of presenting narrative and doing this sort of meta-level storytelling that I think is very imaginative. I've always admired him from mostly afar up until this point, because the only game I'd ever experienced that he had made was PT. I love that game. I think that PT is fucking incredible. It was one of my games of the decade. And I knew going into it who he was, but knowing what he's capable, at least with PT and what sort of fun facts about these games I knew I was going to be in for a treat. However, even that anticipation was just, and that expectation, that bar, had been exceeded throughout my experience with these games. I will say I've kind of gone back and forth with talking about how to actually tackle the reality portion. I thought about breaking down the sort of three basic essentials from sort of game design, like gameplay, story, and sort of overall presentation. Because all three of these games excel in those fields and different strengths and weaknesses, and I do have a preference to these games, and I'll talk more about my sort of ranking echelon of the three games as this video goes on. But in lieu of doing that sort of rooted in those three tiers narrative structure of the video, I'm just gonna do the breakdown of 1, 2, and 3 in chronological, tell you where I'd rank them as the video goes along, and sort of wrap it all up in a nice bow at the end with the reflection on the series as a whole. Metal Gear Solid 1 is easily one of the best PlayStation 1 games I've ever played. This game is fan-fucking-tastic. I had so much fun going through this game, and I will say, as far as moment-to-moment sequences in the game, in the series, this is the tightest package amongst the crop, and I feel like gives it this sort of like great ratio of like great action sequences, incredibly memorable boss fights. The multiple sniper wolf fights create this good planting and payoff moment. You've got the revolver ocelot fight, which is done again in the other games, but I think definitely this intimate, tight introduction is just fan-fucking-tastic. Psycho Mantis obviously is a moment that I knew about but could not participate in because I did not have any Konami save files on the PlayStation 1 memory card that I was using for this game.
You like Suikoden. So, you like Azure Dreams? You like Castlevania, don't you? You enjoy role-playing games. I see that you enjoy Konami games. I'll read more deeply into your soul.
Unless this is where it happens.
Your memory is completely clean.
Yeah, okay.
You have not said often.
But I think that it's a cool boss fight that does, again, that sort of meta gameplay incredibly well. I think Vulcan Raven is a really great set piece, and I love his boss fight. I think that the hand-to-hand fight with Liquid Snake in the finale is also fantastic. Again, it's just a tight, great mission that has some really good discussions of the sort of political side of things.
You ever just film a really good take of saying something and it not saving? Because that's great. Anyway, I kept a lot of the story discussion light. I didn't talk a whole lot about the sort of story of Metal Gear Solid 1 especially, because I think that the story in this game is cool. I will say comparatively to 2 and 3's way of doing a sort of character study or an analysis on an aspect of a character, it's done and explored more artfully. I think that it's good on here. I think that Metal Gear Solid 1's strengths more come from its character moments. The stuff with Snake and Liquid Snake is cool, and sort of Ocelot's involvement with that too is an interesting sort of lore piece in hindsight, especially. But even like the other characters, like I said, the bosses in this game really carry a lot of the strengths to me. They have really good framework around all of them. They give them this sort of level-to-level feeling while keeping within this world that I think is cool, and like it's good world building in tandem with character building, because having the sort of alternate timeline where the Cold War lasted longer and the politics that had wrought from that are an interesting aspect that I think is, again, sort of expertly planted here, but definitely delved into more in the other two games in the trilogy, a little more fruitfully. But I think that here, it's a good foundation. It's just not what I took the most out of from this experience, you know, outside of the loose discussions I brought up here. I also tried to keep it light to avoid heavy spoilers, but if I were to go a little more into that in this, that's mostly what I would say.
I love the fact that this game uses its polygonal art style masterfully too. I think that the characters look really good in this game. I think that the overall dramatics are done so very well on here. And I think that, again, as far as creating a cinematic experience that transcends aspects of the genre at hand, Metal Gear Solid stands far and above a lot in its lane, in its era. However, saying that, it's probably my second favorite in the series. I did have a lot of fun with this. I do wish my last VOD wasn't lost to time and could have my complete playthrough of this on the VOD channel, because I think it was a fun time. I think that as far as interacting with the community, which started here and continued, I had regulars that would come back and see me fail at this game while giving their own perspective on the story.
Just a box.
What's that?
Just a box in the bathroom. There it is, guys. God damn it. Oh, I suck at this game.
It created a lot of great conversation pieces, but I will say, again, as far as the world at large and the commentary that the other games bring to the table, that aspect of the conversation was more intense in those games, which is what sets it at the second point for me. I think that the mechanics in this game are great. Everything sort of is utilized fully.
It kind of does a good job at setting the foundation of semi-open decision-making. You know, the mechanics are so well integrated across the sort of gadgets that you pick up and the things that you have in your arsenal that you can approach each scenario so differently, and I just pick the worst options most of the time because, again, I'm not really good at stealth games. I tried, and there are some moments in here where I definitely shined, and the more action-centric stuff, while I think is done better in the subsequent games, is fine enough here. The stealth aspect, which feels like like the focus is done fantastically. The moments where you need a weapon feel important, like the rocket and the sniper rifle. The sniper rifle stuff is really good in this game. The road to the sniper rifle in general, when you kind of have to backtrack through the base, is a really nice sequence. I don't know, there's a really cool pace to this game that I think is handled fantastically, that I can appreciate them sort of, again, just planting really good seeds here that they would flourish out masterfully as far as, again, set piece usage in other games, and that weaving of mechanics across, you know, environments, done so better in the other games. But as a foundation, quality stuff.
And I think that as far as, again, setting a benchmark for a series, Metal Gear Solid 1 does so incredibly fucking well. This game fucking rips. Its soundtrack is great as well, and I feel like if you haven't played this, you definitely owe it to yourself to do so. Even if you don't really like stealth games, I feel like the control scheme in this and everything just makes sense in a way that is very unique in its style, but doesn't feel janky in the process of doing so. This game is very imaginative and very fun.
I'm the world's biggest idiot. I just threw my scoring system out of the window, or scoring aspect of this show out of the window, I guess. But no, I'm not done. I'm not done scoring games, but I will be hopping in here at the end of each review and giving my score and wrapping up each review to transition. You know what I'm saying? And as far as Metal Gear Solid 1 goes, I'd probably give it like a 9 out of 10. It's one of the best PS1 games I've ever played, as far as like harmoniously weaving stealth and action in an interesting way, with mechanics that just go the distance for being like experimental and like giving the player freedom to tackle situations in different ways. It's fantastic. I think that, again, the story, while not as well nuanced as its sequels, is really fucking strong. I think that as far as, like, again, beat for beat action sequences in a stealth game for the PlayStation 1, Metal Gear Solid, one of the best. So fucking good, and I understand why it's viewed as a classic.
In just 3 years, they created a sequel that narratively, mechanically, and even just presentation-wise went far and above to be a better experience for the player. Metal Gear Solid 2, Sons of Liberty, I know at the time was kind of a controversial game because of something that I knew going into it, and that the main character in this game is not the one that you think it is.
However, in the place of Solid Snake and his overall story, we do have an interesting character piece that definitely fits well within the world of Metal Gear Solid.
And weaponized politics and the like, while also being way ahead of its time in hindsight by really engaging in sort of the social dynamics and politics in a way that is just prolific as fuck.
Plus, the game doesn't abandon those people. They just have really fun ways of subverting further your expectations on what to expect with even their inclusion in this game. It's just insanely good storytelling. I do like a lot of this game, and I like the set piece of the tankers. While not quite as dynamic as Shadow Moses in some aspects, I do think that the tanker sort of acts as further meta commentary on how this is its own dissected piece from aspects of the grand story, while having that same scale within that set piece that the likes of Metal Gear Solid 3 do reach. While there is familiarity here, its dissection and sort of isolation gives it its own unique character that I think the game pacing utilizes masterfully. I think the moments where, again, you kind of go across the entire tankers, or at least transitional pieces across each tanker especially, create these good cinematic beat points that the game utilizes well, or that the team utilized to make a great game out of.
And I like a lot of the bosses on this as well. Even if there aren't nearly as many of them, it feels like, and that aspect of the game feels a lot lighter in lieu of telling a really good story. I think that the Olga fight in the beginning is a really interesting spin on a battle with the flat floodlight. I think Fat Man's a really cool boss. I think Vamp is a interesting as fuck boss, and I like the mechanic of his fight. And while the climax is different from the other two in question, I think that it's at least a good deviation from that style of grand climax. I don't know. This game is really fucking good. If you couldn't tell by me talking about it so, you know, adoringly, it's my favorite in the trilogy. I think that its ways of sort of subverting players' expectations are also very well done. I think the fact that the environments are even more integrated into the gameplay, and the fact that this game looks so fucking good for a 2001 game is a feat to the design of Kojima and his team. I think the music in this game is also really, really good. I think that as far as like creating an even more spy-driven experience out of Metal Gear Solid 1 into Metal Gear Solid 2, it just does so fantastically. I've tried to keep a lot of the descriptions of the details of the game relatively light because I do want people to go in with a similar experience that I had, because I think that it creates this sort of really fun experience for the player to sort of understand the language of Kojima and his storytelling style and a lot of those sort of meta elements. I think that it creates this really nice moment for a gamer that I was happy to have experienced. And again, similarly to Metal Gear Solid 1, a lot of the interactions with the fan community throughout this were incredible. And a lot of people throughout my entire playthroughs did not spoil anything for me. It was just a lot about creating a conversation around those aha moments or those character moments that happen throughout these stories. And I feel like this is just was another really pleasant experience streaming.
I'd give Metal Gear Solid 2 a 10 out of 10. This game is just insane. Again, it has components that I don't think are not necessarily as like free as MGS1, but like in the context of the three games, it's the least flashy because it just takes MGS1 and just like tweaks it a bit more and makes it like fit more into the confines of the new ideas that they were throwing out there. The first person mode I think is much better in the second game, and I think that it's done well. It's understandable. Again, it's in that language of these games, which is kind of interesting.
Go to sleep. That doesn't matter. That's not gonna help. It's not gonna help me at all. In fact, I might as well just die. Hi. Thanks.
And yes, I'm saying that fully knowing that there is an escort sequence in this that can be a little frustrating given, again, the language of this game. However, a lot of my favorite games have escort missions, man. I mean, sometimes you just gotta get through that amidst the greatness. And even then, the escort mission in this, I don't think is really that bad in hindsight. It's just a well-done game. On top of all that, the mechanics are good, the game is fucking gorgeous, the music is good. 10 out of 10 experience. Couldn't love it more.
Which leads me to, I guess, my one relative hot take throughout this video, in that Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater is my least favorite of the three. I do like this game a lot. It was a really fun experience, and I had one of the most insane experiences in my streaming career thus far throughout streaming this game.
I know. I just...
Did I get it? Let's go! Oh my fucking god!
But a lot of my biggest issue with this game comes down to sort of the additions to it. I think that the story is nice as well, but comparatively to especially the second game, but also how tight the first game feels. The story in this is nice. It's another sort of character-focused piece that talks a little bit more about components of the story that had cropped up to this point in Snake's sort of trajectory as a character. And I like the idea of creating this prequel in the 60s with the third game. I think that the camouflage sort of focus in game design is neat, if not a little sort of underutilized at points. And the food system sort of similarly. Kind of neat, if not a little frustrating at points to sort of encounter. But I think the idea of creating the sort of survival spy hybrid is a cool concept. And I think that if anybody were to tackle that and handle it gracefully, it would be Kojima and his team with Konami. I think that it plays into some of the psychedelic ideas of placing this in 1964. And I think that, again, the 60s is a great era to make a political thriller out of that as well, and I think that that sort of concept is really interesting and sort of has some full circle moments that tie into the first game fantastically. I also, again, really fucking enjoy the music in this. It lends itself to feeling more like a 60s Bond espionage type game, and it's fucking great. Again, if we're talking moments that are some of the top in the series, I do like that they integrate the camouflage into two of the boss fights, the Fear and the last one. I love, again, the sort of alternate way that you can kill the end, which is how I did it. I love the non-boss fight that is the Sorrow, because it's a great sort of showcasing of potentially how shitty you are at the game in the case of me, because I was told by a friend at work to not kill that many people in this game. However, because I suck at stealth games...
Alright, well, let's just join him, I guess. Oh, and I'm out of ammo. This is great. Oh, shit. Oh, is this that portion? Oh, no.
My journey through the Sorrow was definitely harder, but it didn't fucking matter anyway!
Oh, that's an instant death?
Ultimately, one of the reasons why I put this below the other two comparatively is because, again, I feel like the camouflage idea is really cool. It lends to some cool gameplay moments in a boss and non-boss sense, and I like the idea of this sort of explorable, unlockable with the camouflage. It creates a cool sort of aspect of the gameplay one can explore. I guess it's just because I didn't have as much interest to do that I didn't care to an intense degree. As I mentioned before, the food aspect also had some moments that just kind of sucked for me, and I didn't like the ambiguity of not knowing how to check if my food was spoiled, or maybe I'm just a complete fucking idiot. And I'll be honest, there are some boss fights in 3 that comparatively to the rest in the series, I just don't think are as good or stand out as lesser in quality comparatively to boss fights in this game in particular, along with the rest of the series. I didn't really care for the Pain. I thought it was a really weak early boss fight. The Fury was kind of neat, if not a little underwhelming as well. And I'll be honest, I like Ocelot more in the first game than in the third game. I like his fight in the third game, but I would say I like him in the first one a little bit more. And there's some other really cool parts in the end game that I thought were fucking awesome and had some cool outcomes in their own. Again, if I'm talking my rankings in the trilogy, it's easily my least favorite of the 3.
In Metal Gear Solid 3, I'd probably give like an 8 out of 10. Like, it's very, very good. And I think that, again, the mechanics that are new, when they are, like, used well, aces stuff. But the game definitely feels like it could use more of that, especially given how nuanced and deep some of those mechanics can go. And I think that as far as, like, ratio of moments that I preferred, there are, out of contextually within the trilogy, moments that I think are like my least favorite that I played in the 3. They're not bad, but they're far less interesting, while having moments that are still very strong, and a lot of those sort of meta ideas that were in the first 2 games still done, and really cool ideas, and having this sort of inverse on a full circle moment with the character of Solid Snake, Big Boss, that sort of thing. It's a cool moment for people that really enjoy the lore stuff with this series, while having more ties to other ideas. I don't know, it's cool. It's a really good game. I'm not surprised that it's the one getting the remake, because it's the prequel, so, you know, it makes sense for them to try this first, see how it goes, and try to go from there.
With that being said, there isn't a bad game in this bunch. All 3 of these games, aces. I feel like if you enjoy great storytelling, or just want a really fun stealth game with some really imaginative gameplay design choices, these 3 games are incredible. I'm excited to play 4 and 5. I actually own 5. I just don't have Guns of the Patriots, but once I get that, I'd probably go back to streaming that and playing through that, on top of just playing into the other deviations that the series had in its prime. Also, if you're wondering if I'm excited for the remake of Snake Eater, no. And that's going to wrap up another episode of Expectations Reality. Did you like it? Did you not? Let me know in the comments down below some of your favorite moments in the Metal Gear Solid series, or some of your favorite games in the series. If you did like this video, be sure to give it a like. If you want to see more, consider subscribing. I drop 2 to 4 vids a week, depending on what I've got going on. I'm going to go. Thank you again so very much for watching. I have been Viral Rack. You guys have good days, lives, and situations, and I'll see you another day.